I have a student, she was at Ohio State University, and she thought she was going to be a veterinarian because she loved animals. And everyone said, you should be a vet. You love animals. You love animals. So she goes to Ohio State, and all of a sudden she's taking anatomy and biology and biochemistry, and she's miserable. And so she's sitting in her room one day, and it's raining out, and she's going like, I am not happy. When was I happy? And she realized all the time she was happiest was when she was leading. She was a student body president of her high school. She was a president of her sorority in college. And whatever she was leading and being a docent and so forth, she was happy. So she went to the university and said, can I get a degree in leadership? They said, well, we don't have one. She said, could we create a series of courses that would lead up to that, communication, psychology, and so forth? And they let her do that. And so she graduated with the first leadership degree from Ohio State. And in her 20s, she was working at the Pentagon, running leadership seminars for majors and colonels in the military because she knew so much about it, because she loved it.
Welcome to the MINDTRX podcast with breakthrough ideas to live your best life possible and how to make it happen. I'm Paul Sheely, and today we'll be talking with Jack Canfield. Jack Canfield is known as America's #1 success coach. He has conducted live trainings for more than 1 million people on how to accelerate the achievement of their personal and professional goals. Jack is the co-author of more than 200 books, including The Success Principles, How to Get From Where You Are to Where You Want to Be, and the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. Jack created the Living the Law of Attraction Paraliminal with me, along with the Effortless Success course. Hello, Jack. So good to be with you here. Thanks for joining this podcast.
My pleasure, Paul. Always a great time to be with you. I really appreciate inviting me.
Well, we go way back. I'm thinking about the early days. I think I first met you when we were both speakers at a conference in neurolinguistic programming that Martha Wigglesworth was doing. And you were speaking on self-esteem. Right. And I was speaking on photo reading. And I was just wondering, how did your early work in self-esteem influence your life's work going on further from there?
Well, it's a good question. I think that it started when I was a high school teacher in Chicago. And I was teaching in an all-Black inner city school, and most of the kids did not have high self-esteem. They didn't have high self-confidence. They didn't believe in themselves. They didn't have goals. Many of them had never been more than 4 blocks away from their home. And so it was a sense of like, I wanted to help them. And so I started looking at what could do that. And I started taking some workshops on self-esteem, self-confidence, and, building up that willingness to believe in yourself and so forth. And I was so good at it that my kids started getting really good grades. They would go to other classes after mine. They'd be all excited. And the other teachers would go, what are you doing? And so they asked me to teach the teachers to do what I was doing. And then the school district asked me to teach other teachers in other schools. And then it just kept blossoming out into eventually a full-time consulting career in the area of self-esteem in the classroom. And during that time, I attended a workshop with W. Clement Stone, his foundation, and it was called the Achievement Motivation Program. How do you motivate people to achieve more? I started learning some more things from him, reading books, taking weekend workshops, and that's really how I got into it. What was interesting is that after that, I went back to the University of Massachusetts briefly to work on a doctorate in education, and I realized that my own self-esteem needed some work. And we used to say at that program, if you have a problem, create a curriculum around it. And then as you teach it, you'll heal yourself. So that was kind of how it all began.
Well, that's cool. The idea that we're always teaching best what we need to learn most, I think is a cool aphorism. But I've also seen you as a continuous and lifelong learner. I mean, wherever we are, you're always taking notes. You're always in the front row. You're a great learner. And I'm wondering, what is the deeper drive for you to continue your learning throughout your life?
I think that it's fun. I mean, everyone finds something they enjoy doing. And for me, I love learning. I love learning new things. And being in a workshop, learning something I can use in my own work, learning about myself is exciting for me. And it's just, I don't know, like some people like to get better at golf. Some people like to get better at baking and cooking. And some people want to be better investors and so forth. As you can see behind me, I have over 3,000 books. They're not all on the shelf behind me there, but that I've read. And I've taken over 600 weekend workshops that I can count up one day. And I listen to TED Talks and TEDx Talks and YouTube videos. And I don't know, it lights me up. So I'm a big believer in doing what lights you up, doing what, following your bliss, as it were. And so for me, if like someone yesterday just suggested a book I should read, and I ordered it and I got it last night and I started looking at it and I go, yeah, this is amazing. So,
and
always learning.
Well, and you see, you're a role model for it. You're somebody who not only is a lifelong learner, but you're also motivated by a higher purpose, an inspired purpose. I'd like to talk a bit about that in a little while,
Sure.
But I wanted to come back to W. Clement Stone. He had a mansion in Evanston, Illinois, where I grew up. He was an insurance tycoon in his career. I went to school with his granddaughter. So
Oh, wow.
W. Clement Stone with his little pencil mustache, and he was a big fan of Napoleon Hill. And I got Napoleon Hill's laws of success. I have to tell you, when I compare Napoleon Hill's work to your work, the Success Principles is so much more accessible. So such an easy read. It's so fun. You could start anywhere, grab a juicy tidbit and move on. How did you amass such a compendium of ideas? What was it like to author that book?
Well, it's really two questions in one. The first one, how did I amass all that information? Which goes back to what you said before, lifelong learner. I started literally, taking that workshop with W. Clement Stone. He made a tactical error, in my opinion. He said, you guys that work at the foundation, you can take any workshops you want anywhere in the country. I'll pay for the travel. I'll pay for the workshop. And I think I took 37 weekend workshops the first year I worked for him. And I learned so many things. And so that was primarily just self-esteem, self-confidence, communication skills, leadership skills, motivation, etc. And then I kept learning. I always wanted to know, how could I do it more quickly, more deeply, more profoundly, and so it would last, so it was more sustainable. And so when things like neuro-linguistic programming came along, and your photo reading program came along, and EFT tapping, and hypnosis, and all these techniques that just gave you or me more power, if you will, to go deeper and further and create more lasting effects with people, I wanted to learn it. I'd be the first guy to go and sign up. And so spiritual workshops, meditation. I think I've probably taken 10 or 15 really deep dive meditation retreats, 10-day, 15-day, Vipassana, Sufi, Kabbalah, whatever. And so by the time I sat down to write the book, I had amassed a lot of this information, and I was teaching it in my self-esteem seminars that I started doing for the general public. And the actual writing of the book, it was interesting. I was sitting in bed one morning on my computer with my son sitting next to me. He was playing some video game. He was about, 7. And he stopped and he said to me, he said, "Dad, how come our house is bigger than all the other houses of our friends?" And I said, "Because I've made more money." And he said, "Well, why? How come you did?" And so I started teaching him all these things I thought were principles of success. He got bored after a while, of course, being 7. And but I thought, geez, what what do I know? And I started just making a list of all the principles and techniques and strategies that I knew. I had about 114. And I thought I'd write a book, 3 pages per technique or per principle, really. And when I started writing them, there would be 7 pages, 10 pages. So I had to pare it down. I have about 30 principles that never got published. It's like the lost books of the Bible or something. So someday I'm going to publish those. But I would write every night, Paul. I was running a training company. I was out there training. I was, doing administration work and so forth. But at night, I would go in, I'd have dinner with my family and eat, maybe hang up, put the kid to bed, whatever, come back out to my office like around 8, and I would start to type or research, either one. And many nights, all of a sudden, it would start to turn gray outside. I'd hear birds chirping, it's like, oh God, I got to go to bed. And so I would go to bed, get like 4 or 5 hours sleep and get up the next day. And I just kept doing that. And eventually I had way too many pages. I had to pare it all down. As you know, when you write, you kind of overwrite. But it took a year and a half to do that. Because I wasn't doing that every day. I'd be on the road for a week training or something. But that's how I did it.
Well, I think of it as your magnum opus. I mean, obviously, you're the publishing story of our age, but the Success Principles is a must read for anybody who's interested in self-development. Let me ask you a question. As a teacher of teachers, one of the things that I have always told teachers is you need to help your learners learn how to learn. So, for example, a math teacher needs to help a child learn how to learn math, how to read a math textbook, how to actually acquire the skills that they're telling the students that they have to acquire. If you were to teach someone how to read the Success Principle book, to learn how to learn what you've amassed in that book, what would be your recommendation?
Well, what I would say, and I don't know that most people would do it, but the ones that have actually have reported great success. But I tell people, read the whole book in one sitting to start with. Not one sitting. It'd probably take you 3 or 4 days to do that. But just read the whole thing to get a feel for the scope of it. And really what the book is, Paul, the first part of the book is a combination lock. I use the metaphor. If you know the lock, the combination of the lock.
Brian Tracy's quote, life is a combination lock, right?
Yeah. Right. And if you know the combination, the lock has to open for you. And so for me, I say that my book is a system, and a system is something that always produces a similar result. Your apple pie recipe from your Aunt Martha, if you do it exactly the way she is, and you don't change brown sugar to molasses and change the heating in the oven, use different apples, whatever, you're going to get the same pie. So what happens is that there is an order. And if you do what I teach you in the right order, in the right way, in the right sequence, at the right time, then what happens is you get the right result. And so I would say just familiarize yourself with the whole ball of wax, if you will, and then go back. And what I recommend is 1 principle per week. So there's 67 principles now, and there were 64 in the first edition. I re-edited it and added 3 more for the technological age that we're in. But the reality is that if you do it for a week, you read it, you kind of assimilate it, and then you apply it in your life. And I teach a little technique called the evening review, which is at the end of the day, you close your eyes and you ask yourself, where could I have been more responsible today, asked more clearly for what I wanted, persevered and not given up, whatever the principle is. And you always get an answer. Some part of you, your intuition's been paying attention. And so if you do that for a week and you apply that principle, you kind of lock it in, Velcro it to your system, if you will, new neural pathways, to use the neuroscience thing. And so what happens is at the end of a year and a few months, you will have really embodied all of this material, and literally it'll change your life.
That's gorgeous. Now, it makes a lot of sense to pick one and work on it for that week. It's actually a technique that Ben Franklin taught. He said it was the most important self-development tool of anything he ever did. At the beginning of the day, he'd decide how he wanted to live one of his 13 virtues. And at the end of the day, he'd review it in exactly the way that you suggested. I'm wondering, when I look at the life of Napoleon Hill, who's a compadre of W. Clement Stone and notably one of the early people to amass a compendium of success strategies, he did not achieve nearly the beautiful life that you've achieved in your life. Do you have a sense of what the difference is that makes the difference?
Well, I think that, look, I love Napoleon Hill's work. He wrote a book with W. Clement Stone, my mentor. I've read his book, Think and Grow Rich, and I've read about 3 of his books. Someone actually gifted me recently in a box with white gloves in the box, a first edition of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, signed by Napoleon Hill, which is kind of one of my treasures, if you will. But I think that number one, he lived at a time where we didn't know as much about the brain and about, growth and consciousness as we do now. No fault of his. I mean, it hadn't been discovered or developed yet. And so I think we know a lot more. The other thing I think is that, Napoleon Hill didn't have the advantages that I have. We have the internet. We have hundreds of, I've created literally hundreds of YouTube videos, podcasts, blogs, the television shows I've been on. It reached Oprah. It was 40 million people. I mean, how was he going to reach 40 million people back then? I mean, he drew large crowds when he spoke, but it was crowd by crowd by crowd. It wasn't like being on the Today Show or the Good Morning America or anything like that. When the movie The Secret came out, this is amazing to me. It was the #1 DVD in China for over 3 years. And I got invited to speak in Iran, which is supposedly the axis of evil, American enemy and all that. And so I go over there and I find out the reason I was invited was because of The Secret, which they had actually showed on national Iranian television. How that snuck by the Ayatollah, I have no idea. But, I had 800 people come in Tehran twice, I was there. And so he did not have that kind of options, those kind of technologies and things available to him. I think you also mentioned something is that I have a gift, if you will, to take what can be complicated, esoteric, and bring it down to where the average person can understand it. I remember when I was writing my first book many, many years ago, I had this, what would I call it? Rule, if you will, as I was writing the guideline, that someone in Kansas with a high school education could read it, like a farmer, and they would understand it. And I wasn't writing for college graduates with PhDs and so forth. And I think that consciousness, and I grew up like that, West Virginia and so forth, that has helped me be very, very accessible to a lot of people.
Gorgeous. Well, it makes a lot of sense to also synthesize and resonate with it so that you are a model of it, you're living it, you've embodied it. And then what you're doing is by teaching it, you're saying, I want to invite you to embody this as well. Stick like Velcro is a great idea. When I think of your work and the work that we've done together, I think of you as being a person who lives by an inspired purpose. And I'd like to ask, how do you feel someone really gets in contact with their higher purpose for their lifetime? And how did you actually come about finding yours?
I think one of the ways, and I'm going to talk about 3 of them that I know because I teach them to students of mine. Number one is just following, Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. There's a great quote, don't ask what the world needs, ask what lights you up, because what the world needs are people that are lit up, in a sense that what makes you come alive was the quote. And that was by Martin Luther King's spiritual teacher. And so I always kind of followed my curiosity. What woke me up? What made me excited? What made my chest expand with like, yeah, as opposed to, oh, I got to do that. And I don't know. And it wasn't always easy. And sometimes it cost me money, in terms of like, this is not going to make as much money as that was. Like when I sold Chicken Soup for the Soul many years ago to an investment group in New York, and they've carried on with the series. I lost some of my identity. I lost my, at that point, $1 million a year income. I've since gained that back through other things. But what happens was, it was time. It was the right move for me. I needed to do it. And if I heard about something that I got excited about, I went and studied it. I went and met the person. I went to the rainforest. I did plant medicine, because it attracted me. So I think that, if you go and do what I call a joy review, you review when were the times you felt the greatest amount of joy. And then what you can do is look at what's the pattern. And for me, it was when I was learning and when I was teaching. And so when I was learning something new, great joy. When I was teaching high school, great joy. Teaching teachers, developing workshops, training up people out in the corporate world, teaching online, whatever. And that's what I love. So, do what you love. And the great Florence Scovel Shinn's book, Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow. Sometimes it's not a lot of money will follow, but the reality is you'll definitely be supported to do what you want to do. And so that for me was the main thing. And, I have a student that I'll share a quick story. She was at Ohio State University, and she thought she was going to be a veterinarian because she loved animals. And everyone said, you should be a vet. You love animals. You love animals. So she goes to Ohio State, and all of a sudden she's taking anatomy and biology and biochemistry, and she's miserable. And so she's sitting in her room one day, and it's raining out, and she's going like, I am not happy. When was I happy? And she realized all the time she was happiest was when she was leading. She was a student body president of her high school. She was a president of her sorority in college. And whatever she was leading and being a docent and so forth, she was happy. So she went to the university and said, can I get a degree in leadership? They said, well, we don't have one. She said, could we create a series of courses that would lead up to that, communication, psychology, and so forth? And they let her do that. And so she graduated with the first leadership degree from Ohio State. And in her 20s, she was working at the Pentagon, running leadership seminars for majors and colonels in the military because she knew so much about it, because she loved it. And so, do what you love, do the joy review. Now, the other technique I learned, and I think you knew it because you worked with the guy who created it, but the idea of like, and I know he's evolved it, but the idea was you ask yourself a question: what are two words that would describe you, your greatest qualities? And for me, it's love and joy. And then what are the two ways I most love expressing that? And for me, it's inspiring people with chicken soup type stories and so forth, and empowering people like with tools and the success principles and so forth. And then the next question is, well, if you could describe the world the way you would like it to be, your perfect ideal world, what would be happening? And for me, everyone would be living their highest vision. And then you combine all that into one sentence. So for me, it was inspiring people to live their highest vision, inspiring and empowering people to live their highest vision in the context of love and joy. And that's my purpose. And so that everything I do is in service of that. And the third thing I teach people to do is you can go inside and you can ask your higher power, God, your guardian angels, your higher self, however you want to hold that consciousness space. And, I usually lead a workshop exercise where people go up a mountain to a higher consciousness, go to a temple. The angel comes down, gives them a golden box with a gift in it that represents their life purpose. And I'll do that with 500 people in a room, and they all get blown away. They get, diamonds and crystals and keys and hearts. And, sometimes they'll get a picture of a children's book because they're supposed to, inspire children, whatever. So there are a number of ways to get in touch with it. And occasionally you'll have a life-altering experience, like the woman who created Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Her daughter got hit by a car, and all of a sudden she just felt this desire to go out and make sure that didn't happen to other kids. And so it can come that way as well.
Well, I'm thinking about it doesn't have to be so mysterious to connect with that greater power, that inspired purpose. I really thank you for that. The idea also is that we need to be on our search for it. We need to actually actively inquire. And I think you've given us a lot of cool ways of doing exactly that. I want to move to.
Let me say one more thing about this.
Sure, please.
So recently I was introduced to this Japanese concept of ikigai. Have you heard of that?
No.
So ikigai is a confluence of four things. They say, is this something you love to do? Do you do it well? Do people need it or want it? And are they willing to pay for it? And if you can find something you love to do and you do it well and people need or want it and they're willing to pay for it, that could become your mission and based on your ultimate purpose. And I thought that was really kind of interesting because there's some things you love to do, but you don't do them that well. There's some things you love to do that people are not willing to pay for or they don't need it. But when you find the confluence of that, that can lead to your profession, to your, your job, if you will, your, not just your purpose, but your purpose in action.
Nice. I love that. Ken Honda is the person I'm thinking of his creation of happy money and being the happy millionaire. He's a great role model of that. We have a very cool paraliminal on that together. So there's a final idea I'd like to address. There was a story that you told me. I don't know if you remember it exactly. You're driving in the car and you were in a bad mental space and some self-castigation, and you pulled over and you tuned in to what was going on. And you said there was a shift that occurred. Your inner dialogue suddenly became very self-affirming rather than self-critical. It was a shift toward that inner compassion. And I know that self-compassion is probably the biggest motivator of success than anything else. Beating ourselves up is not a way to get to success.
Right.
I'm wondering if you do remember that moment, what do you think can happen for the average person, for our listener who from time to time goes into a negative space, beats themselves up, maybe the way their parents or their teachers beat them up or their coaches, and they just perpetuate that? How can they start to make a shift so that their interior landscape is one of greater kindness, a sense of peace and self-compassion?
Well, I do remember that moment, and I actually have a chapter in the Success Principles called "How to Turn Your Inner Critic into an Inner Coach." And the idea is that I believe that all of our inner critics basically come from outside of us, where our parents criticize us, our teachers criticize us, but remembering that they did it for mostly a positive reason. They wanted us to succeed in school. They wanted us to be healthy. They wanted us not to, get into trouble or get beat up or become an alcoholic, whatever it was that we're getting that criticism for, that we're now criticizing ourselves, that internalized voice. Came initially from a positive place. I don't want you to be hurt. I want you to be healthy. I want you to be successful. So to realize that underneath that, there's a positive impulse. Then what I recommend is you talk to your critic and basically say, look, I know you're trying to help me and I want to thank you for your efforts, because nobody likes to be rejected or turned away if they didn't get thanked for what they did contribute up to that point. And so I'll thank it. And then I'll say to it something like, hey, it's kind of like saying to your parents, and stop, this is not helpful. This is not getting me where you want me to go or where I want to go. And so, then you can say, what I'd prefer is that you basically, instead of yelling at me and judging me and calling me disgusting for eating too much food and blah, 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 make some specific requests. Tell me exactly what you want me to do. I want you to acknowledge me when I make small gains, because it's often difficult and so forth. And basically you're coaching this part of you to coach you in a positive way, because it never went to coach school, so basically you want it to be more supportive, more nurturing. And I actually developed an exercise that people can do where you actually put yourself in an empty chair. So I'm over here, the power is in the critic, put you over there. and I get angry at you, and I say things like, I'm angry that you eat too much. You're a fat slob. Your clothes don't fit. You're going to die young. You're going to have a heart attack. You're always snacking on sugary foods, and you're eating too much stuff that has gluten in it. What's wrong with you? You know better. And then you have to say underneath that, the next layer is fear. I'm afraid if you don't quit eating so much and don't start exercising more, you're going to get sick. You're going to die much younger than you need to. I'm afraid that you won't be here to watch your grandson graduate from high school and college. And then you go to specific requests. I want you to stop eating snacks during the day. I want you to drink more water when you're hungry instead. I want you to eat more fruits and vegetables. I want you to practice intermittent fasting. So all these things that you want. And then you end with, I love you. I love you. You deserve to feel good. You deserve to look good, feel proud of yourself, have your clothes fit, be around to see your grandson graduate. You're a good person. You deserve to live a healthy, pain-free, long life. And then I give that part a little hug. So what I'm doing, I'm training myself to move from anger to love, but with specific requests. Because when you're judging yourself, there usually is something you need to do different. But the way it gets delivered is you just go like this, and you're defending yourself and you're not really taking in the value.
Yeah, and it's scary to grab hold of that inner critic or that protector part of you, because it is fierce and it is scary. And when we had that show up originally in our lives, we were little. We were really vulnerable to those kinds of criticisms. So
Right.
To embrace it, to reframe it, and to teach it how to speak with greater kindness is just gorgeous. And I also hear in what you're saying, Jack, the idea of being able to notice small indicators of success. Right. I remember Earl Nightingale said, success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. It's not just the realization of it, but it's a progressive realization. And if we can note, like on a daily basis, as you suggested earlier, at the end of the day, do a review. If we can notice a small concrete indicators of success, we're in a self-reinforcing mechanism, action and feedback, and that helps us really steer our lives forward. So thanks for that. Great wrap up. Any final thoughts that you would leave for our beautiful listener who's been sitting here with us today?
Well, I'll just add one little end of the day technique we call a mirror exercise, which it kind of plays off of the evening review. But you just look at yourself in the mirror and you start by saying your name. Then you appreciate yourself for anything you accomplished that day, any disciplines you kept, any little micro steps toward what you're wanting to do. We're teaching micro actions right now. The idea that, little tiny things done consistently is what leads to success. And so, even if you just meditate for 3 minutes, but you never meditated before, that's great. You meditated 3 minutes longer. And eventually, over time, you might end up meditating for 20 minutes, an hour, but not to beat yourself up for what you didn't do, but to acknowledge what you did do, acknowledge any distractions and temptations you avoided, and then to say, I love you to yourself. And then a psychiatrist friend of mine recently added, appreciate yourself for appreciating yourself, because whatever you appreciate expands. So if you appreciate yourself for appreciating yourself will expand. And then finally, I learned from one of these people, I forget the young woman who wrote a book about it, but high-fiving yourself. So every time I pass a mirror now, I stop and I high five myself, which is kind of weird when I first did it, but it's kind of cool. Like, that might happen 5, 6, 7 times a day. And it brings joy. Even thinking about it right now, you can see I'm smiling. So, but final comments, I would say this: you have everything you need to accomplish anything you want. You're never allowed to have a dream that you can't accomplish. You may have to learn something new, partner up with other people, go back to school, get a license, whatever, but you have the capacity to achieve your dreams. So believe in yourself, trust your intuition, follow your bliss. And I would say if you do that, and if you get a copy of the Success Principles, which I highly encourage you to do, not because I need another dollar, but because I know from the millions of people who've read it and the feedback they give me, they get incredible breakthroughs. If you do all that, I promise you, your life will move up and you'll continually grow in the way you want to grow to get to where you want to be and to be able to do what you want to do.
Beautiful, Jack. Thanks so much for your kind words. So good to be with you, my friend. I'll see you again soon.
Okay, I look forward to it, Paul.
Peace and blessings. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Jack Canfield. You can learn more about Jack at jackcanfield.com. That's JackCanfield.com. And now in the second part of the podcast, it's just you and me. I'll tell you how to use the Paraliminal sessions in the MINDTRX app to easily handle obstacles and move toward the success you want, especially as they relate to Jack's message. If you're new to the relaxing Paraliminal audio sessions, they use breakthrough technologies to activate your whole mind in only 20 minutes to help improve any area of your life. Let's get going. Welcome to the follow-on session to my conversation with a lifelong friend, dear colleague in the field of human development and transformation, the wonderful Jack Canfield. I absolutely adore being with Jack. He's always so inspiring. He's got so much to say. Clearly, we could go on and on about the wonderful ideas that he's come to use and share with the world, what a difference it's made in so many people's lives. When I think about the conversation that he and I had, I focused our dialogue around 5 ideas. The first is the idea of self-esteem. Second is about learning, what I would call lifelong learning. Success, certainly a big part of it, as we talked about his laws or his success principles book. Living an inspired purpose. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but it's certainly part of his vernacular, something we talked about in a program that he and I wrote and recorded together. And also an important idea, which is the inner coach, being able to make a shift from an internal dialogue that is self-critical, an inner critic, to an internal dialogue which is self-affirming and based on self-compassion, turning that voice into an inner coach. So let's look at what paraliminals might be able to assist in each of these areas. When it comes to self-esteem, certainly the self-esteem supercharger is the one to go to. Now, that paraliminal originally was called the self-image supercharger. But when I talked with Bill McGrain of the McGrain Institute on Self-Esteem, he made an important distinction that we're really not trying to improve our self-imaging. Our self-image is actually a comparison of ourselves to everyone else. Self-esteem is something that exists regardless of our comparison to others. It's self-love. It's the love that we have for our own existence, just exactly as we are. Now, there are a number of undertones, subtexts to the conversation that Jack and I had, but I hope you heard that. Self-esteem building is an important part of our work with others, but it's also very important that we lift ourselves up. Now, when I worked at Honeywell, I was a consultant for the director of human resources here at the Honeywell company in Minneapolis. And the director was a man named Dr. David Dotlick. And one of the things I remember that he said is that for a manager, one of the most important jobs he or she will ever have is to build the self-esteem of their employees. That's a powerful idea. Jack recognized that as an essential part of education. It's very hard for us to lift ourselves up and get to a next level if we don't love ourselves, if we don't believe in ourselves. And the self-esteem supercharger is so excellent at helping in that way. The second area is the idea of lifelong learning. Hey, that's near and dear to me, right? Learning Strategies is the name of the company I started back in 1981. The idea behind learning, I believe, is the key to all of our development. If we can learn how to learn, we can achieve in any area that we direct our attention. The ideal paraliminal is called personal genius. In essence, that recording is the self-esteem supercharger for you as a learner. I believe we're all born into the world as naturally gifted learners, but we get that beat out of us by a traditional education approach that wants to get our compliance and obedience and make us sit in rows and be quiet and pay attention and all of that. But the naturally gifted learner is the person who can explore the natural world, pursue their dreams and their joys, and find that learning is the way in which we make progress. Personal genius. The next is the area of success. Jack is certainly a role model for achieving fabulous success in life. He wrote the book, The Success Principles, but most importantly, I think you really heard that in the dialogue, he lives it, really models it for others. And there are two paraliminals that I think would be very effective in helping. Certainly any paraliminal is going to help achieve success in whatever area you're focusing it on. But we talked about a paraliminal called happy money, where we're looking to create success by pursuing our joy and doing something that other people are willing to pay money for. You remember him talking about that? So this is the work that I did with Ken Honda. He wrote a book called Happy Money, and he and I recorded a paraliminal by that same title. It's really lovely, and it's descriptive of not only how Jack has achieved much of his success, but also the successes that I've gotten to enjoy in my life as well. Happy money. The other one that would fit in this category is called wealth motivator. Now, wealth motivator isn't about being motivated to become a wealthy miser. No, it's really about bringing your creativity and your gifts and your talents into the world in service to others. We know that as we help others achieve the success that they desire, we'll always enjoy success in our own lives. So wealth motivator is a way of focusing on how you can bring your creative problem-solving abilities in service to the world. Powerful paraliminal. The fourth area is the area of living an inspired purpose. And I would be remiss if I didn't refer to the paraliminal that Jack and I created together called Living the Law of Attraction. Purpose is something that he teaches. Purpose is also something that he has come to find, and he gave 3 unique formulas for being able for you to find your purpose as well. If you think about living the law of attraction, we're going to attract to us all that we need that is vibrating at the same frequency as the success that we choose to live into. So when we are living an inspired purpose, we're actually stepping into this day as an opportunity to fulfill our highest mission, our highest vision, our greatest purpose, to do our great work in the world, and discovering that, what that is. means that we get to live every single day in the joy of our contribution to humanity and to the planet. And that brings up the second paraliminal, which is joy. The joy paraliminal, really helpful. Now, joy is the energy of the heart. It's the place of our passion. And when we are living out of our inspired purpose, when we're living from the place of our inspired purpose, we are living our life's passion. So joy is an excellent one in this regard. The final area is that turning of the inner critic into the inner coach. My favorite paraliminal for this is the self-love paraliminal, where we look at the trajectory of our lives from our very earliest days all the way to our very last breath in the world. And we gather together the younger you and the elder you, and we bring them together in this lovely, self-affirming, compassionate regard. Can you imagine a benevolent elder coming to you and saying, nice job, you're doing great, keep it up, you're going to achieve the success you want? You have that inner elder in you that has already seen the arc and lived the fullness of your life. And it comes back to support you in your now moment. In the same way, you can go to that younger you who went through difficult times, survived, and actually brought you to this place in your life where you're now thriving. And you get to bestow blessing on that part of you as well, recognizing the courage, recognizing the grief you went through to be able to achieve the high level of success that you get to enjoy in your life right now. And so the three of you, your present self, your younger self, and your elder self, all come together in this lovely dialogue, this lovely connection to determine how to move forward and continue to live at the fullest expression of your life. Well, that's it for now. Enjoy these paraliminals. Do live up to your inspired purpose. Thanks so much for being a part of this podcast. Peace and blessings. We'll see you again soon. Thank you for joining me today. I applaud your willingness to maximize your potential. You can easily use the Paraliminal audio sessions in the MINDTRX app to stimulate your non-conscious mind, that is your inner mind, to reduce any resistance in your life and to propel you to the success you want. Visit MINDTRX.com to learn more. These amazing audio tools have helped millions, and I encourage you to bring them into your world today. Be sure to be back for more episodes of the MINDTRX podcast. You'll find insightful conversations with authors, experts, and thought leaders, all devoted to improving your life's experience. Thank you again for being here on our MINDTRX podcast.